In his 40 films, Gordon Tootoosis has played the wise and the noble, the cunning and the wicked, almighty voice in Alien Thunder, One Stab in Legends of the Fall, Albert Golo on North of 60, Big Bear. He is a Hollywood star now, a veteran of the stage, a hero to his people. Gordon's family tree includes many powerful and influential leaders, and he still lives and cherishes his Cree culture. His film roles resonate on a personal level. His ordeal of growing up in Canada as a First Nations person, the torment at residential school, the anger and frustration that resulted. Time and again, he has returned to the place he was born, on the Poundmaker Reserve in Saskatchewan.
I have tremendous respect for Poundmaker, Yellow Blanket, Big Bear. I feel I try and make decisions, especially to do with my family, based on the values in which they lived by in those days. Because their worldview and mine, of course, are the same.
You should come with us where it's safe.
I cannot.
One of the beauties of Gordon is that he is tapped into that old way. And he was raised by the old people. And he came from that place of horses and wagons and haul your own water. And then going through that residential school, you know, and then interpreting and then standing strong and beauteous today in this day and age.
There were 12 kids in Gordon's family, 10 boys and 2 girls. For young Gordon, it was a happy childhood, steeped in Cree tradition. He grew up speaking only Cree, listening to the stories of his elders. He had a gift for music and sang and danced at powwows.
He was real humorous when he was small, and he was smart, he was talented. He had a beautiful voice, and I guess he stand out, you know, a lot of ways. He cried a lot when he was small. He cried a lot. Maybe he has a little stubborn streak in him, one his own way. He was not a follower, like, you know, he had his own thing. Yeah, real small, tiny little cabins, that's where we lived. One room, just one small room. A log cabin, and it was stuccoed with mud and grass mixed.
In the summer months, we always stayed in a tent by the big garden in the fields, or else when they were haying. We went through all the indignities of poverty, like we had to struggle to make a living. The boys hunted, and we gathered, and my mom traded berries for cash or other things with the farmers in the district.
Yeah, I'd have to give credit to my parents, considering the time they lived. Making a living out of nothing. Incredible wisdom and foresight. They were very gifted.
But I remember going into to the Sundance, and my dad taking us with him in there and telling us what was going on in there. Just listen to these old people and listen. And so we participated in that ceremony from a very early age, and we sang along with him.
The local residential school in Delmos had burned down when it was time for me to go to school. So it was fortunate for me, in a sense. So I was able to stay home and get that foundation, cultural, language, music, all of that. At home, yes, that was, I got some beautiful memories. The first 9 years, I think, was probably the best time of my life. I don't remember when I started riding. Saddles were hard to come by, so I learned how to ride, bareback wherever.
Gordon's golden boyhood came to an abrupt end. Like most Indian children, he was forced to attend residential school, first at Onion Lake and then La Brette. His mother had tears in her eyes when he left. His father was resigned.
I was very happy leaving because it was a new experience. A big truck coming along, grain, kind of a wide open truck, a bunch of kids in there, and away we went. I thought it was a lot of fun until I realized that I couldn't speak unless I spoke English, you see. Whoa, that was a shock, you see. When we found out that also our way of worship was paganism, we're all going to hell, definitely. And I thought of that. What about my parents? What about my grandparents and all those, thousands, literally thousands of people who weren't baptized? They're all gone to hell, Yeah, it was a slap in the face. A black strap. It wasn't leather. It was like belts from machinery. A piece of that, it looked like, as I recall. Yes, that on the hands. And of course, other things like slaps and, knocks on the head. Yeah, I still have a scar on my head.
You sat there helpless, seeing your brother or somebody else being beaten, and there was nothing you can do about it.
The Tootoosis kids had to endure more misery than most because the clergy had decided that their father was a rabble-rouser. John Tootoosis was a famous crusader for Indian rights. For years, he traveled the reserves of Saskatchewan, organizing and inspiring First Nations people. In 1958, John was named the first president of the Federation of Saskatchewan Indians. He carried with him the teaching of his own father, who said, "Reserve land is the one asset the Indian people really own themselves. It is their security. If they ever let it go, they will betray their forefathers and their people." When he was young, John nearly succumbed to a fatal illness, but he miraculously recovered and vowed that his life would be dedicated to his people. And it was.
He made a vow he was going to help his people, so nothing was going to stop him. When an Indian, a real Indian, makes a vow, you got to go through with it.
Because in those days, one had to have a permit to leave the reserve, permit from the Indian agent to leave the reserve. And oftentimes he didn't even do that. People would donate money for him to take a train. He'd go and get on a train, and away he'd go.
On one occasion, he was speaking at a meeting in Broadview, Saskatchewan, when the RCMP arrived. They forced him onto the next train back to Poundmaker Reserve.
The next year, when he got his treaty money, and every year we have $5 treaty money, he had that train fare deducted from his treaty money. That's how small the government was, and how what they would do to try to stop Indian organizations from forming.
John Tootoosis loathed the residential school system and fought hard for community schools on the reserves. The clergy decided that he was working against the Roman Catholic Church. He was branded a communist, the devil himself. The Tootoosis kids were his pagan offspring.
Really threw me right off as a little boy. So, of course, we immediately became little communists and little devils. That's what we were picked on for that. And of course, we had no idea what the hell a communist was.
They made no bones about it. I mean, I wasn't worth until I spoke the white man's language until I was able to go to church every day and receive communion and, you know, all of that. Then I wasn't worth much. I wasn't worth anything.
For his secondary education, Gordon was sent to yet another residential school at LeBret, Saskatchewan. The living conditions were anything but healthy. A serious outbreak of tuberculosis occurred in Gordon's second year.
And a disease like that comes in, you know, it just spread like wildfire. I was one of them. Ended up at, they had an Indian hospital in Fort Capel. Yeah, that was quite a shocking experience as well, you know, because I was always active, you know. And then I ended up on my back, totally immobilized. And a few months into that situation, I thought I made up my mind, hey, I'm not a loser, you know. I'm going to prove that I'm not a loser. Because by then, I think some of the authorities, so-called in LeBret, thought I was a loser because I did very poorly in school and, you know, I had no discipline. So I was a loser. I didn't like authority. I hated authority, you know. I don't like people to tell me what to do and when to do and so forth, and I'd tell them. I was angry. I didn't know what, really half the time what I was angry about. Even after I was married, I was an angry, very angry person. And later on in life, of course, I found out, you know, by way of therapy, where that came from, you see.
At age 17, Gordon was finally expelled from LeBret Residential School for buying beer from a local bar for his buddies.
I was the one who, the supplier, I guess. If it were drugs, I would have been the pusher.
With great relief, Gordon left residential school behind him and headed for Montana, where several of his brothers had found work.
I started cowboying there, working on ranches and stuff, and honing my skills. And then in the winter, I went to log. I kept up with everybody, and I drank heavy, really heavy. I wasn't even of age to go to bars, you know.
And I come down hard on him, told him, you know, get home and go to school, get an education, so you don't have to log all your life.
The lecture worked. Gordon made his way back to Saskatchewan, the first of many homecomings. Because he was a talented artist, the government allowed him to study at the Technical High School in Saskatoon. Soon, he ran into an old flame, Irene Sequasis. He had met her years earlier at a sports day in Duck Lake.
I saw these girls standing, and the guys, of course, are from there, so they introduced me. So I just went up to her and asked her to join my harem. I had the harem happening.
I said, well, I'd be the last person on earth to join your harem. And I thought he was, you know, really pompous, and I diverted my attention away from him, and I just ignored him after that.
But when they met again in Saskatoon, something clicked. They soon began dating.
I think he had a sense of determination and a sense of strength about him that I admired. I would imagine it was like my knight in shining armor.
I think she was the biggest challenge in my life. I couldn't persuade her either way. She had a mind of her own, and extremely intelligent, a whole lot smarter than I was. And she was extremely beautiful, physically, very, very beautiful.
So beautiful She was named Indian Princess Canada in 1964 and invited to attend the Sourdough Festival in Whitehorse, a northern version of Mardi Gras.
So we talked about, so I have this opportunity to go to Whitehorse, but we didn't have the means, we didn't have the money for Gordon to go as well. So we came up with this bright idea, well, let's use the ticket, one-way ticket for both of us.
Yeah, we went for a weekend and we stayed for years up there.
Gordon and Irene were married in Whitehorse in 1965. They both had jobs by that time as supervisors in a student residence. For Irene, social work would become a lifelong vocation. For Gordon, this was the first in a series of childcare positions he would hold over the next 8 years. Memories of his time at residential school inspired him.
I always thought, if I could help one person avoid those experiences, I will have done something. Basically, that was the motive, trying to make some kid's life a little more bearable than mine was,
Irene had never much liked Whitehorse, particularly the drinking and carousing that Gordon was caught up in there. The couple also missed their Cree way of life. Gordon and Irene returned home. Gordon had always been artistically gifted. As a child, he was admired as a singer. In high school, he majored in the visual arts. It was no surprise when he joined the Prairie Indian Dance Troupe. They toured Europe and South America. Gordon was always pushing the boundaries.
I was defying a lot of things that were not done normally by especially Indian people. Those unwritten rules.
By the late 1960s, Gordon and Irene were living on the Poundmaker Reserve. He had become involved in First Nations politics, as a chief, and then as an executive member of the Saskatchewan Federation of Indians.
My father slowed down quite a lot. He's getting old. I thought a lot of people were exploiting his earlier efforts, and I need to do something about that. I thought with my experiences and background, I'd be able to help. I tried very hard, but I discovered later on, in a few years' time, that I just wasn't built for this kind of thing, because I was being swallowed up with the system. As a Cree person, as a First Nations person, because of that, it's very difficult to live in a society whose bottom line is the dollar. It doesn't matter about people's feelings. It doesn't matter about God. It doesn't matter about anything. The dollar is the almighty. That's pretty hard to live with.
One day in 1972, Gordon marched into a production office. A movie about the life of the Cree fugitive, Alien Thunder, was being filmed in Saskatchewan.
I told the director, "You're looking for a mighty voice, here I am," and he really liked that because he really laughed. But in spite of the fact that I lacked experience and all that, I thought I did a pretty good job. I thought I was able to do this kind of thing.
Being hungry tells us better. It's time to kill our cow.
But I also knew that I was able to portray another human being, his speech, his emotions, the situation in which he was in.
Alien Thunder changed Gordon's life. He yearned to be a major player in show business, but he knew he had a lot to learn. he took the advice of another legendary actor, Chief Dan George, who told him that the theater was the best training ground. Over the next 6 years, Gordon would play on stages across the country, honing his skills.
I didn't go to any theater school, but I studied theater. And I had some of the best teachers that one could possibly have, especially a guy like myself. I still didn't have discipline then. I still drank too much. I still defied authority too much.
Lane Coleman, who acted with Gordon in several productions, recalls the first time they met.
I was in this very room when I first saw Gordon Tootoosis, and I think it was in the late 70s. And this man walked up the stairs here. I think I was over against that wall. And I remember seeing him sort of backlit. And he had this kind of incredible regal bearing. And I thought, oh my God, this is the son of kings.
Some of the most innovative Canadian plays were written in the 70s. And at last, they included roles for Aboriginal actors. Paul Thompson directed many of these productions. He and Gordon became good friends.
And I have a very fond memory of a bar somewhere on Yonge Street. It's about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Gordon and I are talking a bit, and there's some other theater people around, and Gordon turns around and he goes to them and he says, "I am Tootoosis. I am beautiful." And he was just a stunning looking guy at the time.
But Paul Thompson also saw a dark side to Gordon. He remembers one evening in a Saskatoon bar.
And the waiter comes and says, "That's it. Here's your last drink." And all of a sudden, it just went, what? Big hand goes to the glass. He takes it like this, and he goes, "I'll tell you what I think of that." He bit the glass, drank the beer, chewed it. Blood, smiled, said.
Just one of the things I suppose to gross people out, I chew glass, chew other stuff, or wood. I don't eat it. I mean, I don't know.
By the late 70s, Irene and Gordon's family had grown to 5 children. They still lived at Poundmaker. Gordon worked at the Indian Cultural College in Saskatoon when he wasn't performing, but it had become painfully obvious that he had a serious alcohol problem.
But there was always that period of when he did come home, the tension at that time. We were all upset because we knew he was drinking, when he was away. Because I knew he wasn't as strong out there as he was at home. At home, he was strong. He didn't have to drink. He didn't drink at home.
I went to a rehab center, and I didn't stay sober. Actually, I went to 3 rehab centers a period of time. I was just, sick and the old saying, sick and tired, being sick and tired.
I believe the effects of the residential school is so powerful, and it affects us in so many ways. I firmly believe that a lot of men, similar to Gordon, really struggle to find their place in life. I even went to one treatment center with him for 2 weeks for myself. I needed to understand what the concept of alcoholism it was at that time and is today. And I needed to understand how it affected me, and because I'm in the picture as well.
Irene may have understood the reason for Gordon's drinking, but her patience finally ran out. One day she phoned Austin Tootoosis and told him she was ready to kick his brother out.
And I phoned St. Paul in Karsten. Says, we got room for one. Says, hold it, I'll be out there. I'll be out there with this guy. So when I left him there, says, you make sure you listen to what these guys have to tell you, because that's what's going to save you. And he done that, and so he's been A-OK ever since, yeah.
Gordon has not had a drink since 1985. That year, he and Irene were on the move again. This time, it was to Vancouver. She wanted to complete her MA in clinical social work at the University of British Columbia. Gordon was hoping to cash in on the booming film industry there. And indeed, television and movie roles came fast and furious.
Everybody loves Gordon. I mean, I have never had any negative response from anybody in the 10 years that we've been together, and it's actually always the opposite. It's this overwhelming response where people go out of their way to call and say how fabulous he is and how much they love working with him and how everybody on set is just in love with him.
In 1993, Gordon landed his biggest Hollywood role yet. One Stab, a wise and faithful Cree in the Hollywood movie Legends of the Fall. His co-stars were Brad Pitt, Tantu Cardinal, and Gordon's great hero, Anthony Hopkins.
I was very intimidated, I guess, by this man. He's a giant. To me, he's a giant. I had to break this somehow, so I went to his trailer and to visit with him. And I told him, you intimidate me, sir. First of all, I asked him how I should address him because he had been knighted by then, you see. He was Sir Anthony. And I said, do I address you as Sir Anthony? Do I? Oh, no, it's just Tony. He's also very open about his alcoholism. It's very difficult for a man like that to find an AA meeting, which is very important for, an alcoholic, to find and talk with people, who are also members. When he found out I was also on the program, then we got to visit him quite a bit, yeah.
Gordon and Anthony, two old guys, they crashed out on this big old rock. The sun was coming down. It was nice and warm on that rock. And there was crew setting up all around them and everything, and someone took a shot of that. So what Anthony Hopkins did is that he had it made up to an 8x10, and he signed it. It was lovely sleeping and working with you, Tony.
In 1992, Gordon was invited to act in one episode of a new CBC series called North of 60. He interpreted the character Albert Golo as a complex villain, a mysterious snake in the grass. So compelling was his performance that he was asked to sign on for the next 6 years.
It's a question of loyalty from her, from you. There are people like that who are Indian. Yes, and I think any actor, would give their right arm to play a villain in any story. It's always the most interesting.
Gordon standing there playing Albert. It was like the Jolly Green Giant. I just looked up, and it just kept going until he was like, I had my neck craned right around, and he was standing there, and he gave me that Albert Golo glare, and I just shivered from the inside.
I always believed that people should mind their own business. Not like you.
Afterwards, yeah, he scared me that first time. And he still does too, whenever I see him.
In North of 60, Sarah the nurse had been driven mad. And in one episode, Albert Golo decides he's going to give her a home.
So, I guess it's finished. It's got a real door and everything.
Congratulations.
I want this to end, Albert, this war.
There is no war.
Elizabeth is getting older. This is going to start to matter to her. This thing between us.
This thing is in your mind.
Then one day at the Yellowknife Airport, Gordon was accosted by two elderly ladies, furious that Albert had taken advantage of the nurse.
You don't own me. Nobody owns me.
They were going to slap me. I said, look, this is just in the movies, but of course didn't give me a chance to explain, but they had to stop them. They were serious.
I like Albert, I've known the 60 because that's so out of character for him. Because to know him in person, he's a really nice person, very gentle, and he's not any way like that. I remember the first time he had been shot, it just upset all the kids, and they were crying, it was so real, and yeah, it's a blast.
By the mid-1990s, Irene and Gordon were on the move again, back to Saskatchewan.
It's one, I didn't want to live in BC and in Vancouver area anymore with the winters the way they were. And I always missed my own traditional cultural backgrounds and Cree traditions that are not in Vancouver, of course. And my daughter was getting sick by then.
In 1992, Gordon and Irene's middle daughter, Glynis, was diagnosed with cancer. After treatment, the disease went into remission. But a few years later, her husband and the father of her 4 children died suddenly after a long battle with alcohol and drugs. The following year, Glynis's cancer returned.
My mom watched her day in, day out, quit her job to nurse her until she had passed on. And I guess to see your own daughter be sick like that and know that she's dying, of course, it's gonna be hard on you.
I took care of her comfort needs, but not to be able to take the pain for her, I think that was most challenging. Because as a mother, you want to take enough pain for your kids instead of them. I think that was most challenging.
They were really close too, my sister and my dad. And everyone's relationship was kind of strained before she had passed on. And yeah, I think you tried to stay strong. And I think the only time I really saw him cry was at the funeral.
I just wanted to be strong for the kids, for her children, my grandchildren, 4 of them. I tried to teach them how to grieve, to try and heal. In the process, I forgot to grieve. So it took me difficult. And I used to hear this from my parents and elders. One of the most difficult experiences one can encounter in life is your own child going before you. I saw it. It is most difficult.
Gordon found some solace in his work. He appeared in 35 films during the 1990s and into 2000. His most challenging role, and the most important to him, was Big Bear. In the CBC miniseries of that name, the great Cree chief had refused to sign Treaty 6 until, with the last buffalo gone, his people were starving. His young followers lost patience and killed 9 white people at Frog Lake. Although Big Bear had tried to stop the massacre, he was tried for treason and served 2 years in jail.
It was in Gordon's soul to be Big Bear. He'd heard all these stories since he was a little boy. So slipping into the role of Big Bear was like putting on an old shoe, you know?
And I know this. Our time here is over.
I thought Gordon did an incredible job, because when he's got that ability to get somebody's attention just by squinting his eyes a bit or just lowering his voice to just a light rumble, people start jumping to make sure that it doesn't erupt. Again, part of that Tootoosis legend going, you don't want to see that. You don't want to see it.
Playing the role of Big Bear brought back memories of Gordon's childhood, especially his years of torment at residential school. In this scene, Gordon and Big Bear become one.
It was the most insulting, and if anybody can do, it's like separating you from a part of your spirituality, your own spirit being severed. That moment. And they did that to kids in school. My older brother had braids when he went to residential school. That was their first thing they did was cut them off.
These days, Gordon is more sought after than ever. He looks for challenges in a script. Comedy has become a favorite.
My character is, he was an activist, probably in the 60s. And he went back to school, became a lawyer, he's a developer. He's quite caught up in this story, quite by accident, you know? They take him for a ride, a real ride.
And action!
But it's a lot of fun.
On stage and screen, Gordon has always been cast as Native. He has been satisfied with this. His goal has been to humanize the Indian for white audiences. But now, at age 61, he would welcome new challenges. The Prime Minister in a television series, perhaps, or King Lear on stage. It's already happening for younger Native actors. Gordon Tootoosis has paved the way. The Tootoosis family continues to live on Poundmaker Reserve. But for Gordon, life there is not as good as when he was growing up. He watches with dismay as welfare and other government programs wipe out his people's independence and their traditional life on the land.
The economic system was so different, but still, people had to work in order to eat, in order to live. And that was the whole thing. All that was wiped out by programs of the federal government. Matter of fact, I've always been almost convinced that there's always been a conspiracy. There's bureaucrats there in Ottawa, academics, whose assignment is to get the Indians to self-destruct. Certain time. Some of us did a very good job of that.
Gordon thinks that one day he'll return to politics. For now, though, his acting, his art, still remains his passion. These days, his life is firmly centered at Poundmaker, where he is raising his grandchildren and spending time with Irene.
We've developed our love for each other over the years. The vitality of life is very powerful for us. We have fun together, we do challenging things, we take on challenges. So yeah, it's been worth it. it's been really, really worth it.
When their daughter Glennis passed on, Gordon and Irene adopted her 4 children. 5 other grandchildren consider the Tootoosis house a second home.
He does everything for them. I mean, anything, like he'll drive them to all their games, even it doesn't matter how far they are. To come and watch them play a basketball game or play their games, he'll just drive for hours to do that. He makes separate breakfasts when they're all in the house all together. He'll go and ask them one by one what they want to eat, and he will make each of them exactly what they ordered. I think it was last summer, my parents took the smaller kids to Calgary Stampede, and my daughter wouldn't go on any rides, any of the kiddie rides, so he went on every ride with her. As tall as he is and as long as his legs are, he sat in there with her and he went on all the rides.
He's perfect, like in my eyes, he's perfect because he has his flaws, and like when people have flaws, you have to be able to accept them. And he accepts anybody and everyone, and he helps people out no matter who they are. That's why I think he's perfect.
I think my entire life revolves around him. That's how important they are. I couldn't leave now. I know there's a lot of work and a lot of money to be made down south, and there's a lot of work for me in California. I could move, but I can't. I don't want to.